actually the oldest son of 5 boys. And as we were growing up, I knew that my grandfather had served in World War I, actually as in the cavalry, believe it or not. They still had that at that time. And so he didn't talk a whole lot about it, but I knew he had served. And then my father also was drafted in World War II. And he served in a mortar battalion and served in the European theater, and then he was actually headed over to the Pacific theater when the war in the Pacific ended. And so he spoke a little bit more about his background, but again, it was one of those things that you really had to engage him on and draw him out on before he would talk about it. But so he also sort of influenced me in that regard, and then apparently I passed that on to my kids because both of them are currently in the Air Force. One is a doctor and the other is an intel officer. My decision to go into the military, and in this case the Air Force, is one of those decisions that you really don't understand until later in life. At the time that I initially joined the Air Force, I had applied to the Air Force Academy. I thought at the time the Air Force Academy was relatively new. It was only about 10 years old, and so I thought that would be kind of exciting to go and leave my small town in upstate New York and try something different. At the time I thought I wanted to fly, and so that was another reason that I applied to the Air Force Academy and was appointed by Robert Kennedy, and so headed off west to start my career. I did go to pilot training while I was at the Academy and got my private pilot's license, but that kind of convinced me that maybe flying wasn't the thing that I really was meant to do. And so I applied to New York University Law School, and I got a public service scholarship to attend in New York City. And so I went from the mountains of Colorado to the mountains of New York City and got my law degree there. When I graduated from the Air Force Academy, my thought was to go to law school, get my law degree, and employ those skills on behalf of the Air Force, but I never in my wildest dreams did I think that I would make a career out of it. After a couple of years on active duty and going through a number of assignments, I really liked the people that I worked with. There was a real sense of camaraderie and teamwork that appealed to me. I definitely liked being part of something that was, contributing to a larger purpose. And so I started looking at my Air Force career maybe on a more permanent basis. The JAG department is actually a very old department within the military. It started back in the days of the Revolutionary War. George Washington had a lawyer on his staff. Unfortunately, that guy got court-martialed for various offenses. But since then, we've improved our level of service, and so JAGs have always been fundamentally a part of the military as advisors to commanders. And so we were always on the commander's staff. We function exactly like a general counsel would function in any corporation that we might deal with here. At Holland & Hart, we answer, a variety of questions all the way from criminal law and justice to environmental law to labor law to government contracts, which is what I do now. And so you really have to be well-versed in a lot of subjects. As you move through various assignments in the Air Force, there is you never know what you're going to get. It's kind of like the proverbial box of chocolates, So, in one assignment you can be serving as a prosecutor and going in and court-martials, and in another assignment you can be working on government contracts. On one occasion, we went up to Berlin and did a conference up there, and that was before the wall fell, although it was very interesting because we went over to East Berlin on one evening. and we noticed that the streets were all wet, and it had not rained, and so we couldn't figure out what happened. And then we later found out the East German police had used water cannons on some demonstrators, and shortly thereafter the wall fell. So very, very exciting time to be in Europe. There was a lot of, if you had told any of us that the Berlin Wall was going to come down, I think we would have laughed at you, because it was just impossible to imagine that this thing that we had lived with, this terrible threat, this Cold War, would be over that quickly. But it was. I mean, almost in an instant, in a historical sense. After the wall fell, I went back up. I had an espionage case I was defending in Berlin, and so I went up there to take care of that. And as we were going through case preparation, we'd go out to dinner in the evenings, and one evening one of our hosts said, "How would you like a piece of the Berlin Wall?" And I said, "Well, yeah, I'd love it, but how do you, isn't it dangerous?" And of course he says, "Well, no, it's all right. I've got a place, kind of secluded, secret. We can just go. I've got a hammer, and you just chip out, take off a few pieces, and you can bring it home and amaze your friends." So I thought that was a good idea. I was with the prosecuting attorney at the time. I thought, okay, I'm in good company here. What can go wrong? So we went to this location. We were busily getting our souvenir when I noticed some headlights approaching from the other side of the wall. And it was a patrol car with 2 East German guards, and armed with machine guns, and they kind of had them pointed toward the ground, but in our general direction. And they came up to us, and my whole life flashed before me, and I thought, boy, this is it. I am, here's where I can see the headlines now. Chief Defense Counsel arrested with Chief Prosecutor, by East German border guards, and the East German guard came up to us, and he didn't speak any English. We spoke some German, but in German, he takes his hat off, and he extends his arm with the hat in it, and he says, 40 marks, to sell it to us, because this was fairly going on. And so I thought I would take the opportunity to introduce him to the concept of capitalism, and I said, how about 20 marks? And so we had a nice conversation after that. They left, and we returned home with our souvenirs, and then down to the Air Force Academy, where I finished my career as the general counsel at the academy. And that was probably one of the more rewarding assignments, because I had graduated from the academy in 1971 and finished out my career as the general counsel there, and so I was very, very happy to be assigned there. I tell people it was a law school exam question every day, because one day you could be dealing with disciplinary issues, another day NCAA compliance issues, another day you could be dealing with faculty issues and publications and intellectual property, and so it was it was a pretty varied assignment, which I enjoyed very much. But that explains my presence back in Colorado. And I really wanted to do something a little different, and I wanted to find a place where I could land that kind of shared some of the values that I had grown up with in the Air Force. And starting with the Air Force Academy, everybody knows, of course, about the honor code there, and how there is a really deeply embedded sense of honor and integrity, for our graduates, and we take it pretty seriously. I mean, the Air Force has a slogan, as you might imagine, integrity first, service before self, and excellence in all we do, and that kind of sums up that component of military service, if you will. And so for me, I was looking for that. But when I got out of the Air Force and started looking around, talking to government agencies, talking to law firms, it became apparent to me that Holland and Hart was, I would say, the most compatible in terms of that sense of integrity, that sense of teamwork, camaraderie. I didn't see that in a lot of other places that I interviewed, and so I was attracted to Holland and Hart for that reason. And the other thing that that really attracted me to Holland and Hart was the fact that they were very entrepreneurial. I mean, not only did they believe in the integrity and the teamwork and those kinds of things, but they were also willing to give me a chance to sort of grow a new practice area. Government contracts was something that was only tangentially dealt with by lawyers in the firm. I was the first one that they brought in, I think, to specifically focus on government contracts, which is what I've done since coming to Holland & Hart. And again, that appealed to my sense of, do it right, make it last, and do something that makes a difference. You talk about the change in really the American perception of the military. And I think that at least since I entered on active duty and now have been in private practice, there's been a dramatic groundswell of support for the military. When I first came on active duty, the Vietnam War was in full swing, so to speak. People were being drafted and sent to fight in South Vietnam, and it was a very unpopular war. The military was unpopular. It was a kind of a low point, and since that time, I think there's been a complete 180 shift in how the military is perceived by the public. I think that folks understand that even if they don't agree with the particular policies that are being carried out, that the people in the military don't have a choice. I mean, it is now an all-volunteer force. It's not a draft force, and that I think has made a difference. But at the end of the day, I think people have a deeper appreciation and understanding for what's required for folks who do serve their country through the military. 9/11, I mean, dramatically changed the perception that people have of, and it was an attack on the American homeland. I mean, it was, yes, we had the attack on Pearl Harbor, but that was, those were a couple of islands off in the Pacific. I mean, this was a direct attack on the continental United States, and people really understood that it was going to be a new world, and it was a game changer. I mean, one story that comes to mind just recently, I came back from a trip, and I was on a private airliner that was transporting the remains of a service member from Afghanistan. And it was no one knew, of course, when they got on board, but the pilot soon after takeoff told us what the situation was and said that, he would appreciate it if everyone would remain seated while the honor guard escorted the remains off the aircraft and left the side of the aircraft. And to a person, everybody did that, and in total silence. I mean, it was just a very emotional experience. But I don't think that would have happened, back during the Vietnam War. I mean, again, it's just a new climate, and I'm happy. I appreciate the fact that my children, who are on active duty, as I mentioned, are perceived in a whole new light, and that's important.